Hey, welcome to the Biochemistry Academy. In our playlist of membrane biochemistry, today we'll be talking about the fluid mosaic model. Now, this model describes the cell membrane. It tells us that the membrane is fluid, meaning that they are free to move. And we'll talk about mosaic. Mosaic tells us that it is composed of different parts. For example, we have the phospholipid, we have the protein, and we also have the cholesterol, meaning that the cell membrane is made up of different parts. It is composed of different components like the cholesterol, the glycoprotein, the glycolipid. Now, the first component we will discuss are the phospholipids. Now, the membrane is mainly composed of phospholipids. Now, these phospholipids are amphipathic. When we talk about amphipathic, we mean that it have a polar region and a what and a non-polar region. Now, the head of the phospholipids is polar, and we'll talk about polar, meaning that it loves water, meaning that it is hydrophilic, and the two fatty acid tails are hydrophobic, meaning that fearing water, they don't like water because water exists both in the extracellular fluid and the intracellular space. Now, the phospholipids, the heads are faced towards the water region, while the tails are faced away from the water. Now, another component of the cell membrane is the proteins. Now, the cell membrane consists of proteins. There are different types of proteins. They are highlighted. Now, the proteins that are found here are called the peripheral proteins, while the proteins that are found at this region are called the surface protein, and the proteins that are found here are called the integral protein, and the proteins that are found in this region are called the transmembrane protein. The transmembrane protein differs from the integral protein. Now, the transmembrane protein, it spans across the membrane, meaning that part of the protein is outside the membrane and the other part is inside the membrane, while the integral protein is a protein that is embedded within the membrane. Now, it should be noted that transmembrane protein is also an integral protein because it spans within the membrane. So we can say all transmembrane protein are integral protein, but not all integral protein are transmembrane protein. Then let us talk about the surface and the peripheral proteins. Now, they could function as enzyme, which is used to speed up biochemical reaction inside the cell. A protein attached to a sugar chain is called a glycoprotein, like the one in our diagram. Now, this glycoprotein, they play a role in the immune system with antibodies, which function in cell recognition and cell-to-cell interaction. Now, when a sugar is attached to a phospholipid, like in this our diagram here, it is called a glycolipid, and a glycolipid play a role in cell-to-cell interaction and cell signaling. Now, the next thing that we'll talk about is how things or substance flow into and out the membrane. Now, if you remember our previous video, we talked about the semi-permeability of the cell membrane, meaning that they allow some certain substance into the membrane and prevent other substance from entering the membrane. So we'll be talking about these substances. Now, for example, small non-polar molecules can easily enter and leave the cell. Example of such molecules are oxygen and carbon dioxide, which is the carbon dioxide, CO2. Because if we check, oxygen easily enter into the cell because of respiration. Now, water is a small polar molecule which can also diffuse through the membrane, although not easily. Now, because if we check both the extracellular fluid and the intracellular space is composed of water. Now, because of this high concentration of water in the cell, it is possible for water to pass through, although not easily, because of the tails of the membrane are non-polar. Now, there are special proteins that can easily transport water into and the cell and out of the cell. Now, they are called aquaporins and they are a type of integral protein. Now, other particles like iron, potassium, and sodium can flow only through a protein because of their charge. Now, these proteins are called ion channel protein, which allows sodium and potassium to pass through. Now, carrier proteins allow glucose to pass through because if we check, glucose is a big molecule. Now, there are certain proteins which are called the carrier proteins that allow glucose to pass through the membrane. Now, another important component is the cholesterol. The cholesterol has a polar region, which is the hydroxy group of the cholesterol. It is polar because of the hydrogen bonding that is present. Now, the fourth fused ring is the non-polar region, which is facing the interior part of the membrane. Now, cholesterol plays an important role in acting as a buffer to maintain the fluidity of the cell membrane. For example, if the temperature is increased, the fluidity also increases, meaning that the phospholipid moves away from each other, but cholesterol helps to make them not to move too far away from each other. Now, when the temperature goes down, the fluidity decreases. The phospholipids would want to become rigid, but cholesterol helps to make them not to become too close to each other. If this video have helped you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.